I'm scared, Martha. Akili yangu imekuwa kama mchanga.
Half-open window follows a retired photographer who, after being diagnosed with dementia, his newly found bond with his unemployed graduate grandchild is threatened. This is after his children decide to enroll him in an old folks' home, Jumba la Wazee.
Option 2. You go to a country and find the title deed.
People should have decency towards like the aging community, the aging, like the old people. We just need to see them as people, and we need to care for them and make sure that they are not just healthy, but they're also happy and they feel fulfilled and they feel welcomed and they feel loved in the society and they don't feel neglected.
Directed by Omar Hamza and produced by Margaret Washera, the casting of Half-Open Window was not through open auditions. The production was a success despite shooting in a cold location.
Normal times we call for auditions and we tell people to send in auditions. But for this one, it was it needed a lot of, I don't know, to be a bit keen on who it is we were casting.
The main character, Edwin Nyudo, is a very old person. So working with a very old veteran in the industry, a very old actor, was interesting to say the least. He's the oldest person I've ever worked with, and again, a very huge learning experience, a very huge moment for growth, both for me and hopefully for him as well.
It has been slipping away. Soon, hakutakuwa na kitu chochote.
I think it's an interesting time to be an African filmmaker because there's a lot of change, there's a lot of opportunities, and for those who are ready, change is coming, and good change, yeah.
What the mind can't remember, the heart never forgets. Jacqueline Mashara for Cinemas and Theatre.
Thank you very much for watching KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum and Anne Wangeshi is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Now, over the next 2 hours, we shall be having conversations. The first hour, we shall be talking about the state of small and medium enterprises in Kenya, the challenges they are facing and the opportunities that there are. The second hour will be about quantity surveying in Kenya. What are the challenges and what is their role in supporting a thriving construction industry? So we get into that first conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. Today I am with Dennis Omulisia, who is the chairman of Western Elites Association. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Betty.
Karibu sana. Karibu. SMEs support the bulk of Kenya's economy. They provide over 80% of the jobs in this country. What is your inkling in terms of the state of SMEs in Kenya currently?
Thank you so much, Betty, for the latitude to be here. You know, first of all, we all admire China as of now because of its greatness. And how did China become what it is today? It is because of what we call Chinese village enterprises. These were small enterprises that also can be referred to as SMEs of today. So they did move starting from the days of Chinese Mao, rather the chairman Mao. Then from there we went to now Deng in the 1980s. Now these SMEs are the Chinese village enterprises which started in the villages. Now they are the ones that now have grown into big companies. Now we're talking about Alibaba, we're talking about all other companies. In fact, most of the manufacturing now, in terms of manufacturing globally, is actually happening in China. Yeah. And most of the imports are actually coming from actually China. Talking about the manufacturing, the technology. When you want to manufacture, like for example, cooking oil, you mostly you will source from China. So now back to now where we are, Kenya, whereby, as you have rightly put it, that we actually we are still driven by the SMEs. We are in that state that China was in those days, whereby you have said that 80% job creation. And also another fact is that according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is that we have them contributing 40% to our GDP. So that is very great. So if we were to go now to ask ourselves, what is the state of these SMEs currently? So number one, you look at it from this angle that we start with the first of all, which is very important, the credit. So, and this has been part of the government's monetary policy, whereby you realize when the current government came into power, we had very high interest rates, correct? And I think last year I was here, and the interest rates were at around 20%. And then now the CBK came in and said, no, we want to actually lower these interest rates. So they started by actually lowering the CBR, the central bank rate, went down significantly from 13%. Now it has been lowering up to around 9%. So the banks now have been really aligning to that, and they have actually been able to reduce their interest rates from 20%. Now we are talking about 13.5 to around 15% there. So that is a very great thing. And then now we also look at another journey from the government perspective in terms of financing now still. We have seen interventions by the government. Number one was the issue of the Hustler Fund, which of course most SMEs have been really uptaking that. There are positives there. And we were talking, when I was here with your colleague, Mr. O'Brien, we were talking about increasing actually the size of that fund. At that time, we were talking about 500 shillings, but it is great that this fund continues to grow with time. And then let's now look at, we have other funds, of course, the Women Enterprise Fund, the Youth Fund, and all that. And and then also the government has been doing a lot now in terms of, we look at formalization of businesses, whereby you realize that businesses are able, those actually who are now to grow from a small business now to a company, it is been made easier with the aspect of the e-citizen, and the government has been really pushing the issue of the e-citizen and the issue of governments, rather companies being able to actually formalize themselves. When they formalize themselves, that means that they can now be able to tap into the credit that we're talking about. That means from actually banks, because you need formal credit to grow, Madam Betty. Yeah. You need formal credit to grow, and there is no way you are going to access that formal credit if you are not formalized. Right. So that is the state now. And then now there is also other trends that are on. Let's
just keep a hold on that. I would like us to delve more into the issue of credit access. Yes. For SMEs. We know that despite the reduction of the rates by CBK, yes, banks are still doing risk-based lending. Yes. And for the most part, SMEs are still considered to be high-risk businesses, right? Yes. How can we ensure that the lenders are also aligned with these lower rates, and at the same time offering credit that is affordable and accessible to the SMEs? Because if you're still lending to them on a risk-based lending calculation, so to say, that interest is still high for them, so it might still choke them. How can we make sure that the rates are actually reflecting for the SMEs?
Thank you so much. You know, at first, initially, we had the issue of the interest rate actually capping, whereby the government policy was that, rather the CBK was that let's have a ceiling, whereby more of it cuts across board. But of course, we saw that over time, it was the wisdom of the government that this was not feasible. So they said, let's now revert now to what we've talked about, the risk-based pricing. So that means you are, of course, given you're given a loan based on the risk, of course, that you possess. Okay, now the thing is that now we have to look at it from this angle, that of course the risk-based pricing is of course the best to operate with. But then how can we then ensure that these interest rates, like for example, most likely, of course, ordinarily, SMEs will of course attract a high interest rate, because banks themselves, they are focused on the issue of cash flows, which of course you realize that SMEs will not have a very strong actually cash flows. Then you will talk about the issue of even the management aspect, like how are they managing the finances, the businesses, the ability to actually to repay. But then the best way that we can do to ensure that they don't suffer under, of course, the new regime that we are getting into is actually to ensure that these banks are able also, or lenders, they are actually able to look at the potential of these SMEs, not just from the point of cash flows. Sometimes the cash flows might not be so promising, you know, they might not be so promising, but there is the issue of the potential that they have. And then the issue of these banks being able, of course, to assist them in terms of management so that they become more for credit worthy to them. Yeah, because here we are talking about actually the ability to repay, as I've said, and then number two, we are actually looking at their management. So that is how the banks should approach that issue, so that these SMEs are not exposed to high interest rates, because now they have now that discretion to actually to price them or give them loans based on how they deem actually they should give them. Yeah, mm-hmm. Thank you.
The issue of formalization that you had brought up earlier, there are a lot of SMEs that are yet to be formalized, and they are locked out of accessing credit. They are locked out of accessing government tenders, you know, that are very lucrative as well. So how can we ensure that we are formalizing more SMEs? There is, of course, the part of sensitization and awareness as to the benefits of formalizing your business. And what does formalizing a business even look like? Thank you so much.
Yeah, the issue of formalization, very critical, bearing in mind that according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, is that 79%, around 79% of businesses, actually these SMEs, they are actually not formalized. Yeah, so they are not formalized. So then you realize that, as I've said, as I've alluded, is that they'll not be able to enjoy actually some of the great things that you have mentioned, really. So the thing is that now realizing that they are not formalized, it's about now the government and of course other sectors, other players coming in and of course sharing with them the importance of the importance of actually formalization. What are some of the benefits that they will get if they formalize themselves? That you're able to tell them that, look, you are going actually to actually be able to access credit, formal credit. We're not talking about the Shylock credit. You're not talking about the, of course, SACCOs also play a critical role, but of course they will not provide that capital or loans that are actually can make them to really grow to significant levels. So number two is that, of course, to also inform them that the goodness, of course, formalizing yourself is you can also, of course, do now export, because exportation, when you talk about the issue of the export, you're talking about being a formal entity. Yeah, and then even to import, it's always good when you are actually a formal entity. So another thing is actually the campaigns, of course, which can actually come in. Of course, we have channels like the media and all that. But we are very hopeful, very optimistic that with now these SMEs and people getting more enlightened and educated, they're going actually to be able to go into the formal space. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned China and how they took advantage of their SME sector, so to say, to create the global conglomerates that we know now. What is stopping Kenya, or what lessons can be picked from their journey? Because a very huge percentage of our SMEs do not hit their 5th birthday. So businesses are being born and they die. They keep being born and they die. And so what can be done to ensure that businesses are moving from that part of SMEs, you know, to now grow into corporations so that others can also keep growing and the economy grows?
Thank you so much. So we have to look at China, as I've said, is that the growth was primarily because there was government goodwill. So we're talking about the legal and the regulatory space. It was actually enabling growth of these SMEs. So the government was playing a very huge role in terms of being able to actually to cluster them. So they're being told that now you want to do, we are grouping you here, be able to do, for example, be in the textile space. And then the others are able to do, another portion of course, businesses. So that number one is that we ensure that there was an issue of supply of what is needed, correct? So if we have, of course, the government has analyzed and realized that, for example, this is the shortage that we are having, for example, of, let's say for sunflower, of course, to do manufacturing of cooking oil, then you realize that the government can be able to look at what are some of the areas that, of course, are very ideal for growth of actually sunflower. And I think the government in the 1970s was really trying to do that, whereby you realize that we have those regions that were being, of course, set aside. These ones are for sugarcane, for example, others for coffee and all that. So, and then we talked about the issue of China itself was able actually to come in and even focus on the issue of education, whereby the chairman Deng, or the president during that time, who was Deng, was able to say, let them, of course, be able to be educated and acquire relevant skills. And then we also have this Deng, the president of that day, was able actually to also say, let him go and bring in actually outside capital. So that means he was going to the United States, basically the West, and of course bringing them in to invest. And when they were, of course, investing, of course he promised them that we will, of course, give you, of course, offer you good market, and of course we also talk about cheap labor. Then from there, number one is that they were able actually to have themselves growing. Then number two, we also had the issue of now, the issue of also them being able to actually adopt technologies that actually these outside companies were actually bringing in. So that means you're able to copy the skills and the technologies. And then we also have another very critical thing that they used to do. We talked about the government aspect, environment around being able to protect their businesses. So that is called, of course, protectionism, whereby we're saying that we are strong in this, so we are not allowing outside competition. And I think that is a common practice even currently, whereby you are realizing with the current president, of course, Trump. So he's talking about the issue of tariffs and all that. He's talking about America first. So it's actually about, for these SMEs to grow, is then about what I've said, basically, that the government has to really continue pushing from the issue of the credit access, where, of course, in collaboration with banks and other lenders, is very critical. From parts of the e-citizen continuing to push towards that, and the financing that's available, like the Hustler Fund and all that, they can continue actually to scale that size so that they're able to access, capital that is more, can actually grow them. We talked about this fund, if it could grow to even 20,000, for example. That one is actually great for them to actually to operate. Yeah.
You talked about the issue of access to markets, and when you're talking about accessing export markets, it's a whole other ballgame. And one of the challenges that was coming out yesterday, agricultural stakeholders were saying that the certifications and the standards that are required in the export market are very difficult for small businesses to access or to attain, so that they can access those markets. So I'd like to hear from you what steps can be taken, because there's a lot of aggregation that has to be done for small businesses to access the export markets. Sometimes a small business cannot fill 2 containers that are required, but when they work with 2 or 3 other businesses, they can do it. So what actionable steps can be taken to open up the markets for the small businesses without necessarily, making them debt-laden, so to say?
Thank you so much. And again, we start with the government, and it's just recently, you heard that Kenya and Uganda, they entered into a very great partnership, whereby I realized that these commodities now are not attracting the issue of so much taxes. So we are on the border, so we can really trade. That's about to start with regional integration. So the East African community with the 300 million plus, in terms of the market size, is great. Then we have seen even from the African context, we have actually the African Union trying to really push for us having a free trading zone in terms of in Africa. But then we come into, back into this country, whereby you realize that most of our exports are actually outside Africa. And you realize that the US now, they're talking about the issue of tariffs. I think we were actually embossed 10%, but I don't know if it really came into effect. So you realize that I've talked about governments globally trying to do what we call protectionism, but as ourselves as now as a country, we have then to look at, of course, how we can boost our what we call our balance of payments. Of course, that basically means you're talking about having a good trade position. Now, that means you have then to get back into the country and say, how are you going, for example, the commodities that you have talked, like you have talked about, that number one, you are in a situation whereby these SMEs, they cannot be able actually to do ship one container solely actually. They have actually to group themselves. And I've talked about the issue of agglomeration, them being able to be actually be grouped together actually, so that then they can actually match their strength and be able to manage like our whole container. Then number two, we have the issue of the taxes, correct? We have to look at how can we maybe continue now to lower the export tax and of course other regulations. We have a lot of actually documentation that is needed. In terms of the licenses, the papers that you need. But most of the time, that's why most of the time you realize that we only have a few companies that are able actually to do the export. But then they are really will be focusing on, of course, the big players. So it's about the government coming in to say, just the way we are doing with the Hustler Fund and the other capital, and other initiatives, how can we, of course, provide a situation whereby we can facilitate them being able to export commodities. And then another thing is, again, still on the issue of the capital, it will always be cross-cutting because it's an enabler. You need capital actually to be able to do the export space. So those are some of the areas that we have to look at in order to then boost our exports. So SMEs have a very huge role to play in that space.
Kenya is a net importer.
Yes.
And there is quite an opportunity for SMEs to even satisfy or take up the demand that is there in the country, right? Please speak to that.
Yeah, you have said it correctly. We are actually having a trade deficit. That is correct. And then that is because most of the businesses that SMEs get into is actually what we call import substitution areas, whereby you're saying we're doing sugar, for example, that's farmers now. That's on the part of farmers, but it can still be imported. So you realize that when you are in such an angle, you are not very viable actually as a country from an economic perspective. Then you have to focus really on how you're going to promote exports. That means manufacturing, which is very key. We maybe move away from exporting raw materials. Of course, it's not, you cannot really totally move out of exporting raw materials, because there was an anecdote actually about, for example, coffee. We have the CEO, a certain CEO, who was talking about, he went to the US and he was looking at this coffee that he exports in raw form, realizes that it's almost more even 50 times when it's processed there in the US. So the thing is that if we can really focus our effort on actually manufacturing, we can actually be able to try and actually offset that. And the government has been continuing to promote that in terms of the EPZ, the export processing zones. Recently we have one that actually came up in Busia. It's called Nasewa EPZ. So that means that the government is really trying to actually change that situation. So if the government can continue with that effort, we're going to be in a situation whereby we can really try to change, to try and actually improve the situation and have a position whereby now we are having a trade surplus. Yeah.
That's very important. There's the issue of technology uptake for SMEs. It is still a challenge because of many reasons. Sometimes it's because of lack of understanding. Other times it's because of the affordability of this technology that is required for them to scale. What is your take on SMEs' uptake of technology in this country?
Thank you so much. So the issue of technology, we should be in Africa top in terms of mobile use. I'm talking about the smartphones, the internet, and all that. So the thing is that, okay, let's look even trading, which is now moving into e-commerce, correct? Then we look at even the issue of payments. You realize that they're going digital. When talk about the banking space, around 80% now is moved under the digital banking. But then you've rightly put it that we have those SMEs, should be majority of them, they are not actually adopting technology. But that should be in the interior, because in towns you have a situation whereby most of the businesses are now transacting via e-commerce, as I've said, and even their payments and all that. So the issue of accessibility of technology is also a critical area that that we actually have to focus on, so that when it comes to payments, we can actually be in a digital fashion, because the world now is going actually digital. We have the AI and all that. But then you realize that currently the providers of such technologies, even the drones and all that, they are in a situation whereby they cannot be afforded by, for example, a farmer there in the village. But then the thing is about, again, the government continuing to manufacture actually internally or domestically its own technology, because you realize most of the technology we are importing. So that means it will be a bit costly for these SMEs. So if we can actually work on those areas in terms of also training them, there is the issue of affordability and training them. Do they really understand or know about e-commerce? Can they maybe use drones? All those aspects. So it's about training, which is also very important. We can really train them through the groups and all that. Then if we were also to really go deeper, it's about working with various, actually the banks and other players, actually private players, to actually come in and actually offer these technologies at a very subsidized rates.
Yeah. When we talk about the people who are now in SMEs, entry of SMEs into the market, let's talk about skill gap. You talked about the management issues that are there, management inefficiencies, so to say, in SMEs. Tell us more about that. What is lacking in terms of the way SMEs are managed as opposed to how big corporations are managed? Where is the mismatch there?
Thank you so much. You know, it's number one, the issue of corporate governance. So the issue of corporate governance, you realize that it's about these big businesses really focus on corporate governance in terms of even balance of course, powers there, the internal processes, how are they going to actually operate, very important. But then, on the other part, SMEs, you realize that is more of a sole proprietorship, whereby we only have one individual. So this one individual is the CEO, is actually the chairman of the business, is doing everything. So that means that if these SMEs have to grow, they have to focus on corporate governance. Of course, from that small perspective that they are in, that's number one. How can they manage themselves? What practices can they have? We have the issue of the bookkeeping. For example, you realize that most of them don't actually do bookkeeping. We have the issue of also, if you're not, of course, keeping your books, you'll not know your position. Actually, you have to know what is actually your, for example, financial position. Most of them don't know. But actually, with training, we see even banks, circles, etc., coming in to try and actually work with them in that journey to ensure that then they're able to be aligned in terms of that aspect. And then another constraint that is actually making them not to grow and be like big companies is actually the aspect of capital still. But that one we have really exhausted that aspect.
Yeah.
The capital aspect, very critical. And then basically I've talked about the issue of management is what is actually a challenge. Decision making, also the issue of lacking long-term planning. You realize that most of them, you rightly put it at the start, that most 70% of them, or 3 out of 5 of them, don't actually survive within 3 years. They don't go beyond that, or to 5 years. They don't go beyond that, and that is because most of them get into this business as a way of actually surviving, as they look forward to formal employment. Maybe someone was fired from his job, then he's just focusing on, let me have this for the interim, as I work on getting employment. And then number two, even those that have never been employed, they're really looking forward to, as a temporary aspect, as I work towards now moving to actually be employment. So it's also actually a matter of longevity, whereby is your mindset in a long-term perspective, or you're just there as a survival actually mechanism. So if you look at the large, corporates, they are focused on long-term, 5 years, 10 years and all that. So long-term planning, very critical in that aspect. We've talked about, talk about the issue of insurance also. You able to see that insurance, we are still very low, 2% in the country. We are below 2% in terms of insurance coverage. So that means that if you are not insured, when disaster strikes, like I think around 2023, 24 there, we had the issue of floods that were sweeping businesses and bringing them down. So if you are not insured, that's a very huge problem that you will be into. So those are some of the areas that are actually making them not to grow to a large space.
Right.
Yeah.
That means that there's a perspective challenge there, because you're saying a lot of people are going into business as placeholders. You know, let me do this, nione kama itajipa mahali, yeah?
Yes.
So for people to, when you're dealing with that mindset, a lot of young people, this country has a very high unemployment rate. And of course, small businesses are one way to solve the challenge. If anything, they're the biggest employers currently.
Yes.
So what can you tell young people in terms of changing their mindset on how they look at business, from being a placeholder to something that can actually transcend their own lives? There are people who've set up companies, and years after they are gone, those companies are still thriving. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that great question, Betty. Yeah, so you rightly put it again, 80% of these SMEs providing actually employment in this country. Of course, then that means that the youth, the women and all that, they have actually to actually look at how can they actually get into these businesses as a way, of course, having their sustainable income. The issue of the long-term mindset is actually very critical. So if they can come in and they have actually acquired the right skills, from an entrepreneurship perspective, that means they can actually be able to actually change their lives. You can change your life when you start your own business and grow. You can actually be, when you're having challenges, for example, finance. Currently banks, we have so many banks that are now offering what we call non-secured or unsecured lending. That means maybe you're having a challenge to do with the collateral. They can actually offer you a credit minus collateral, but that means then you have to be well managed, in terms of the books. But banks also try their best to actually walk the journey with you. So as long as you actually even try to formalize yourself, that's a very great way to do it. So the main thing here is that these youth, the women and all that, to look at it from that angle, that they can be able to grow, they can be able to access training that is actually available, to be able then to actually to grow. Yeah.
You talked about a lot of SMEs being in import substitution areas.
Yes.
I would like to hear from you what other opportunities exist, so that you're not always doing import substitution. What opportunities exist that young people can go into?
Thank you so much. We have number one, technology. The world is now technologically driven, and so if they have skills in the technology space, And then there is no more of it's a global thing. You can be able even to actually offer technological support to even someone in the US and all that. And then in terms of agriculture now, we have those crops that are actually, of course, they can't be substituted. We talked about the issue of coffee, for example, and you have seen the government continuing to promote the issue of coffee growing in the country. We talked about the tea and all that. So there are opportunities that exist that actually will not actually expose you to actually imports. You know, the imports substitution crops are known, as I've said. The crops are known, like the sugar, you know, sugarcane aspect. I mean, and those other areas, the rice and all that. So I've talked about technology. They can embrace that. There is the issue of manufacturing, light manufacturing. You will not really face a lot of competition in some areas. Like when you talk about cooking oil, of course we have an issue of most of it being imported. But if we can grow actually domestically, we can be able to actually to offset that. So because there is, I mean, there is always a lot of demand for that. Yeah, so those are some of the areas that they can actually be able to focus on. Yeah.
Right. So when you're thinking of growing your SME, yeah,
yes.
You've already established you have good corporate governance. You have great borrowing. That process of now exiting that bracket called the SMEs, how does that look like?
Thank you so much. In terms of how you can exit, of course, you're talking about transitioning now. Yes. Correct? You are very stable. So that means transitioning basically starts with formalization that we have talked about. Yeah. I mean, and we have said that the government has made it very easier for you to be able to formalize yourself. Talked about the e-citizen. Actually, just at the comfort of your seat, you can be able to register that company. So you have yourself formalized. And then number two, you then move from a point of key man's risk. That means the I position to us, you know. So, you know, most of them, of the SMEs, they're run by just one individual most times. So you realize, and also they are holding into that, like they have that concept that this is my business, you know. I don't want other people in. So that means you transition, then you have also to look at now, how can you now embrace putting up teams? You know, you have people, another one can focus, for example, on operations, another one finance, you know, all that. So, and that of course falls into the ambit of corporate governance that I've mentioned. Very critical, the issue of corporate governance. And then also you have to then focus on capital. And capital, it can be in form of banks, bank loans, or also it can be in terms of bringing in other equity, investors. That means your business, once you have registered it, or when you're registering, you tell yourself that instead of actually having 100%, because it doesn't make sense having, 100% of, for example, 10 million. It's better you have even 5% of 100 million. It makes sense. So that means you then have to look at that angle. So if you are in a position whereby you have good teams with you, you have good capital access, then you also have you have a situation whereby you are well managed now. You have actually then to focus on how you're going to actually improve your management position. And that means bringing in people that can actually plug into the skills that you don't have. Maybe you are, of course, you are strong, for example, in, let's talk about the clothing space, just an example. So you are good at bringing in customers, you know, all that. But then you are not good in the finance world. Then you tell yourself that you're going to bring in someone to actually to assist you. So it's a very exciting journey And I've said that number one, it starts with just being able to formalize so that you are actually able to be a corporate entity. Very, 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 very important. So then you will also be looking at a situation whereby you can align also to the government policy. You know, when you're not formalized most of the time means you are not being exposed to a lot of legal and regulatory space, you know, aspects, the licenses and all that. So you also have to focus on how are you going to align yourself to ensure that legally and of course from a regulatory perspective, you are very solid. So those are some of the main actions that actually you have to focus on in order to transition yourself.
Right. A very big issue right now is environmental responsibility. There is the issue of climate change, and it has come down that businesses must do business that is sustainable. So incorporating sustainability into a small business, please tell us about that. Thank you.
The issue of sustainability is very important. We have globally we have seen initiatives, the World Bank, the United Nations and all that, being able to focus on the green space. And even the government itself, we have the issue of the carbon credits, you know, that are coming in for these businesses to actually to go green. So it is, and also being able to reduce their carbon footprint as a business, and all that. So there are so many opportunities that are available for these businesses, funds that really available for them to actually go green. And sustainability actually cuts across. You talk about even CSR, the corporate social responsibility is also part of, actually, we talk about sustainability. Most of them are doing that. But then most of it that you realize that this CSR is being exercised by large corporates. But still SMEs can do that in the small ways that they can. So the issue of really tackling our green aspect in terms of reducing our carbon footprint and all that, it's actually something that we should all embrace. And that means even going the technology's way, the way we are doing. You realize that now businesses are trying to also go cashless, you know. I mean, here even in towns, you realize most times now people are not using cash in their endeavors, actually, their payments and all that. So it is actually a lot about these SMEs and actually largely the businesses trying to really focus on those opportunities that are available, trying to tap into relevant training to be able to align. Because we say that this is we all have, it's a world that we have. There is no other maybe planet that we can live into. We all have this world, so we have to focus really on how to reduce that carbon footprint and all that, going green. Right. So what is the future of SMEs in Kenya? Thank you so much. So the future or the outlook, it looks promising if, number one, the government can really continue with the initiatives of reducing the capital, rather the credit rate. So because that is the cost of capital, and most businesses are relying on actually financing, outside financing, mostly loans, as we have said. So the outlook, it will continue being, of course, very strong and, of course, bullish if that can continue, because that's what we've been grappling with from that space. Number two, we are going to really see a continuation in terms of uptake of actually technology, the e-commerce, the digital payments and all that. We have a very strong, what we call our pride, the M-Pesa, for example. We realize that most businesses are embracing that. So that is actually going to continue from an outlook perspective. We are also going to see them continuing actually to to actually focus on formalization. Now that we've talked about us having a situation whereby it has been made more easier in terms of the e-citizen and all that, they're going actually to formalize themselves and grow into great giants, as we talked about the China and all that, those companies. So they are going to continue. So with technology, we have a very strong youth population, should be around 60%. And now that most of them are exposed to technology, you know, the AI and all that, we realize that they're going to continue to adopt that now. When they go into business, now that it is an SME space, it's an area that provides 80% of that job creation, they are going actually to adopt that. And that's a very strong reality in terms of how they do trading and all that. So we are also going to see government actually continuing to come in. The funds that are available under the government, of course, better agenda, they're still very strong, but they have to continue, of course, working on that. And then we are also going to see a situation whereby, we talked about Uganda, whereby we now have a situation whereby we agreed, entered into a partnership to really do business together, trading and all that, and there's no attraction of huge taxes or zero taxes. So realize that regionally, we are going to continue growing. And that means that SMEs are being to be able even to export what they have, the produce they have, you know, the light manufacturing and all that. Mm-hmm. And even Africa actually globally, and actually globally. So there are other areas that, of course, we have to look at from the outlook. Those are the challenges that we'll really continue facing. And that will mean in terms of infrastructure, the issue of access to roads, electricity is still costly. The issue of internet, but of course the government really tried to focus on the issue of the last mile connectivity in terms of electricity. But then the issue of the roads, of course, that has to continue. The issue of, on the part of financing, it's basically about ensuring that we have the issue of these SMEs being banked. So the banks have to continue permeating and penetrating in the interior to ensure that these businesses, the SMEs, are able to be banked so that they can actually acquire actually reasonable capital. Yeah.
Right. So as we come to a close of the conversation, if someone is watching and they have just started a small business or they want to get into business, what would be your message to them?
Thank you so much. So they have to know that number one is business, when as an entrant, it's about you sacrificing yourself most of the time. We have talked about at the start, you are the messenger, you are the CEO, you are everything. But of course, it's about being very resilient in terms of that, so that your business can actually work, pick up, and grow into a great business, actually a company and all that. Mm-hmm. Number two is that actually to tell them, of course, to embrace technology. Now that we are in a technology space, everything now, almost everything is now about technology. So they have to really adopt that. They also have to have a positive mindset, so that we're not having a situation whereby you are getting in because it's just more of an interim way as you await employment or a big opportunity somewhere. So it's about them really coming in with a strong mindset that this is what I'm going to actually to earn from, and I can also grow it to even survive 300 years. You know, we have businesses set up by people like the Rothschilds and all that. They have thrived for 300 years plus. That means you can be able to grow it, be your income earner, and also leave it for your generations. So then they have to focus on the available opportunities in terms of capital. A lot of them are available. We have the issue of the government policy, because most of the businesses suffer from that angle, knowing what licenses do I need, when should I maybe pay my taxes and all that. So it is actually something with strong positives and also challenges. So they should be ready for both. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I'll give you 30 seconds to tell us your closing remarks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's actually about let's continue growing these small businesses that we have into giants. The government to continue actually offering that supportive role, the banks and all that, because the future looks very great and bright for us. So it's about continuing to focus on how this business can grow and they can actually thrive, so that we can reach to the levels like China that we have mentioned and other great giants globally. So let's keep going, and the future looks great. Thank you.
The future looks great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have been speaking with Dennis Omulisia, who is the chairman of Western Elites Association, and we have been talking about the state of small and medium enterprises in this country, the challenges that they are facing, as well as how to ensure that they grow into large corporations that even transcend the lives of the founders. Well, that is our first conversation of this morning on BizCheck. In the next hour, we shall be talking about matters construction and the role of quantity surveyors in ensuring that we have a safe and functioning construction industry. Do stay with BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. See you after this quick break.
Composing himself, short runner. Oh, and there's a brilliant save from Otieno.
Kenya's stars on the football pitch continues to shine brighter. The dedication, the self-belief and enthusiasm across the board is visionary.
Olunga against Shaju. And Olunga scores, perfect penalty into the bottom corner. The keeper goes the wrong way. And Kenya are right back in this now.
Join us for the FIFA World Cup 2026 African qualifiers. Match Day 7, Group F, Kenya versus Gambia on Friday, 5th September 2025 at 4 p.m. from Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani. Live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1. Your true sports partner.
Kufa alayka hadha, chunga ulimi wako, hifadhi ulimi wako. Muadh ibn Jabal radhiyallahu anhu anamuuliza Mtume, je, tutahukumiwa na kuadhibiwa kwa kila tunachokizungumza? Mtume sallallahu alayhi wasallam akamwambia, hakuna kitu ambacho kitawatumbukiza watu na kuwaingiza motoni kama vitu ambavyo wanachuma kupitia ndimi zao. والبطن وما حوى.
الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت ساو كريمكم فجانا فايدا جوايتا في كزامو ترودي كمسادا.
They say the earth without art would just be get it? We circumnavigate the globe and traverse the local scene to bring you art and culture at their very best. From fine art, culinary art, performing arts, and even cultural events, you name it, and we have got you covered. My name is Kevin Kasioki, and I will be serving you this and much, much more each and every Friday at 8 p.m. only on KBC Channel 1.
So get connected, first of all, to God. That way, when things happen in your life that don't seem to be your desired way, or vitu zinaenda tu venye zinataka kuenda,
one thing goes, like now, much ikienda, God gives you another thing.
I experience many challenges, especially when I will go to a bus station where I need to board a matatu, and they ask me, where are you going? And I'm forced to write somewhere for the conductor to understand how much he will cost me.
So get connected, first of all, to God. That way, when things happen in your life that don't seem to be your desired way, or vitu zinaenda tu venye zinataka kuenda, your relationship with God is what keeps you in charge.
So how do you reconcile the two generations?
Discipleship. And also it's on the church end to have compassion, and also on Gen Zs to understand that ukikuja church si rules zako. Like God has his ways of doing things. We can understand this generation to hell.
Na mbono nangengania bwana ya mwenye, na nilimwambia wewe I'm actually married.
So what
to 5 breathing wives.
Kazi ya ujasusi ni kazi ambao inakutambulisha ujue ule mtu mahali yako na vile ako mpaka jina.
Can you tell this honorable court what is the name of that person? Because your owner money has been poured. Mbona sijakotoa ngozi niuse na pia inatengeneza bags?
Mheshimiwa kweli. Sasa mimi unaniuliza, si wewe ndio unauliza.
Kwani mimi mnyama mheshimiwa? Between me and you.
Wewe
ulipewa ngapi ndio nimalize? I can double or triple.
Wewe sikiza, hatuko hapa mambo. Tena uone haya mbele yako tu unataka
hata siwe naongea na wewe.
Na wewe pia mimi ndio naamrisha hii koti.
Thank you very much for staying with KBC Channel 1. You are watching BizCheck, and my name is Betty Kiptum. Lensa Odingo is my colleague on the sign language interpretation for this second hour of the program. And in the second hour, we shall be talking about quantity surveying in Kenya. What is the role of quantity surveyors in Kenya, as well as issues around the construction industry? And to have this conversation is the president of the Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya, who is QS Mutinda Mutuku. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. Let us just start with this question. What do quantity surveyors do?
Yeah, it's a question that we get quite often. But of course, I mean, lately, you know, a lot of people now understand what quantity surveyors do. And we find ourselves having to explain ourselves a lot lesser than before.
Right.
So what quantity surveyors do, they are basically in a very short way, if I could say it, just construction cost consultants. Yeah. So we are construction cost managers. That and contract administration, which is the legal side of construction contracts.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So what is your role in the construction industry? I mean, we have had so many issues in terms of the costing of projects in this country, you know. Yes. It's supposed to cost 1 billion, it ends up being 10 billion, and, you know, no one can explain where the 9 billion is going. Yes. What is your role in ensuring that construction projects are meeting their costs and at the same time serving the purpose?
Well, just from where we left off, is that variation of cost overruns are things that inherently happen in contracts. and in construction. It is just the magnitude and the degree of that then would start to raise flags and concern.
Right.
In projects where from inception everything has been done properly, then you see lesser and lesser of such incidences where cost goes way beyond budget, because a lot of the things will have been foreseen, and where things are not foreseen, then the provision on contingencies then ought to cover that without overshooting the contract budget astronomically. So it also depends then on what, because the figures that you mentioned are huge. Hardly will you find a building contract that goes several times over.
Okay.
And if it does, then there is reason for concern, and there's probably need to look deeper. On the infrastructure side, I guess maybe that's where we see such huge numbers of projects. In construction, hardly do we get many projects of that value. Well, up until now, when the government is doing massive housing projects, where the contracts are now bigger and they run into billions. Yes, but cost planning, involving a QS and things done properly, design, because a QS basically just costs designs. Yeah, it's nothing, we don't bring in our own aspects of the work. We just cost the design as given. So if you want to start to build before you excavate, then and we're in the team with other consultants who are the designers, engineers and architects, then we cost their design. And we tell you, this is how much it will cost you. Yeah. And then it is our work to control that cost. Where there are variations, we'll bring them to you. And variations are from different angles. Maybe change in design, maybe additional work, different spec that the client wants to be done differently. And then, and variations are justified given, the route that they come through. Yes.
So when someone is doing a construction project, let's say you're constructing a house, we have seen that the construction industry in Kenya has had quite some challenges in the recent past. There have been some building collapses and all that. I would like to hear from you, is there a role that quantity surveyors play, or being that you are in the construction industry, what is your comment on that?
Yes, indeed, there's been quite a number of collapses, regrettable, some of them with fatalities and loss of lives. Of course, others just loss of property, third-party property. From our perspective, and I'm not trying to exonerate us from all this, but each consultant and each player has their role. Our role is the cost part of the building. So if you tell us, cost this, we will cost it. In terms of course, we are also involved in supervision to the extent that we want to see what you specified, is it what that is being done? So to some extent, yes, we can be blamed for that. But a lot of it then will go to a lot of other reasons. There's been the initial part of the project design part, consultants are involved, and then the developer, ceases to see value for the consultants and goes on to implement their project. Of course, several things would happen. Is that you'd get substandard material, and they're there in this market. You'll get poor workmanship because there's no supervision, and even maybe the technical capacity of the executors that you're using. Yeah. So there's all this myriad, and there's also shortcuts. Yeah. The procedure of doing the work. For instance, if you're doing a slab or substructural work, then there's a process to cure, so that it gives strength to be able to build on more. But if you don't do it, you take shortcuts, then those are some of the reasons that you find then there are collapses. So I would say if we want, and there's a body that is charged with that. Yeah. There are bodies that regulate the consultants. There are bodies that regulate contractors, who are the main players in this. Yeah. The developers also have a body, but it's important that we all work together to make sure that we have such incidents. It really is regrettable that you would start a construction project and then our projects become, areas where people die.
Yeah.
It makes absolute no sense. Yes.
It's interesting that you bring out that aspect of people just ignoring the role of consultants, because I have spoken to engineers, architects, and now you, and a common theme that is coming out is that it seems as though Kenyans, majority of them lack the ethics when they are doing the project. So they will involve the consultants at the start, as you say. Then after that, they're like, we're good now. We have the numbers, we have the approvals. We can go into our construction and we do our own thing, right?
Yes.
So what would be your message to people who are watching, Kenyans generally, about that?
My message is simple. You're avoiding the cost of a consultant. And then you're exposing so much of your money because you're trying to avoid this little amount that you pay a consultant to be your eye, to make sure the lots of money that you're investing in this is taken care of and is safe. Because, for instance, pick a collapsed building. First of all, you've lost all the monies that you put in that collapsed building. 2, you've incurred liabilities if there are fatalities and injuries of people. And then 3, if there's damage to other people's property, again, further loss to you. In the name of, you're avoiding a few thousand shillings and exposing your millions of hard-earned money. It makes no sense at all.
Right. Yeah. So it's important from start to finish to involve the consultant.
Yes, it is important. And you've seen where consultants, professionals are involved properly, projects run smoothly. Yeah, you will find things flowing and working. You will not find, for instance, a sink that is put at knee level in your house that you have to bend. Some of those things. You will not find a switch that is put on the opposite side of the door, that you're opening the door and you have to turn around and switch on the light.
Yeah.
A lot of those things may seem simple, but they are thought out because it starts from design. So where will the conduits run, where the wires run, so that where will the door be positioned. So there's all reasons to use professionals and consultants in your construction.
It's funny you mentioned that there's a clip I saw, or a picture I saw online. Someone had put like a staircase onto the toilet. So you have to go on a staircase onto the toilet. Anyway, so back to issues about quantity surveying. Project delays. What causes project delays? Again,
many things. And I say many things because I'm also involved in arbitration of construction disputes and as an arbitrator.
Okay.
And you see disputes coming from different angles. Time overruns and delays in construction. You find either the scope was not properly thought out at the beginning, and these are some of the things that will also affect the cost, the overrun in cost. The scope that it's growing, that keeps growing. And also I began by saying, with proper planning, at design stage, we sit down and design together, client brief, the consultants, and then involve the contractor quite early. Then you minimize these risks of cost overrun and delays in delivery of the project. Of course, the other thing is that you find a developer, and this also developer will be anyone, private or public, the government, also not remitting their monies in good time when they are, because what we work with is a system of work is paid in stages, interim valuations, and they're paid. If you don't pay you pay the contractor, for instance, the first certificate, and then the second certificate you withhold, then the third, and you're delaying your own work. And I've seen a lot of that, it is part of being ready. Again, back to planning. By the time you want to build, then think about source of your funds. Be ready to execute.
Right. You'll continue with that thought in just a little bit, Bwana QS. Let's go to the swearing in of the panel of experts on the compensation of victims of protests and riots, and the inaugural meeting with the technical team. That is happening right now, the swearing in ceremony, Supreme Court of Kenya. Let's listen into that.
Congratulations to the new chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kindly take your seat. I now call upon Faith Odhiambo Moni to take her oath of office as vice chairperson of the panel.
I, Faith Odhiambo Moni, having been appointed as the Vice Chairperson of the panel of experts on compensation of victims, do solemnly swear that I will well and truly serve as the Vice Chairperson of the panel, and do that in the exercise of my duties I shall obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution of Kenya and all other laws of the Republic. That I will not, other than in the discharge of my duties or with written consent, directly or indirectly reveal any business or proceedings of the panel or any matter brought under my consideration or shall become known to me as Vice Chairperson of the said panel. And that I will faithfully and fully, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge the trust and perform the functions and exercise the powers devolving upon me by virtue of this appointment without fear, favor, bias, affection, ill will, or prejudice. So help me God.
Thank you. Congratulations. I now call upon Kennedy N. Ogeto to take his oath as member of the panel.
I, Kennedy Nyabuti Ogeto, having been appointed as a member of the panel of experts on compensation of victims of demonstrations and public protests, do solemnly swear that I shall well and truly serve as a member, and that in the exercise of my duties, I shall obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution of Kenya and all other laws of the Republic. That I will not, other than in the discharge of my duties or with written consent, directly or indirectly reveal any business or proceedings of the panel or any matter brought under my consideration or shall become known to me as member of the said panel. And that I will faithfully and fully, impartially, and to the best of my ability, discharge the trust and perform the functions and exercise the powers devolving upon me by virtue of this appointment without fear, favor, bias, affection, ill will, or prejudice. So help me God.
Thank you. I now call upon Irungu Houghton to take his oath as member of the panel.
Good morning, everybody.
I, Rungo Houghton, having been appointed as a member of the panel of experts on the compensation of victims of demonstrations and public protests, do solemnly affirm that I will and truly serve as a member of the panel, and that in the exercise of my duties, I shall obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution of Kenya and all other laws of the Republic. I will not, other than in the discharge of my duties or with written consent, directly or indirectly reveal any business or proceedings of the panel or any matter brought under my consideration or shall become known to me as a member of the panel. I will faithfully and fully, impartially, and to the best of my ability, discharge the trust and perform the functions and exercise the powers devolving upon me by virtue of this appointment without any fear, favor, bias, affection, ill will, or prejudice. So help me God.
Next is Reverend Kenneth Barasa Simiyu, who can be coming forward.
Those are proceedings coming to us from the Supreme Court of Kenya, where the swearing in of the panel of experts on the compensation of victims of protests and riots and is going on. That is the swearing in that is going on, and later on they will have their inaugural meeting at the KICC. And of course, part of that panel, the principal coordinator and chairperson is Professor Makau Mutua. Vice chairperson is Faith Odhiambo, who is the Law Society of Kenya chairperson, as well as its members, technical lead and joint secretaries. So our very own Abdiaziz is on the ground and shall be filing a detailed report of those proceedings later in the day. We come back to studio now and continue with the conversation on the construction industry and the role of quantity surveyors in that particular industry. And I am with the president of the Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya, QS Mutinda Mutuku. Thank you very much for staying with us.
Okay.
Before we took that particular link, you were telling us about why project delays.
Yes, and I was just attributing all of it to largely to planning. Planning from the onset, in terms of design and having a schedule of work and how to operate, and then also planning in the sense that the developer needs to have the funds ready or identified sources ready for funds for the construction. And then this leads me to a verse in the Bible that sort of also supports that thinking, that before you start to build, and of course the role of a QS. And it's Luke 14:20-30. It just goes to showing you how old this profession is. And it says, if I can just quote, which one of you, intending to build a tower, will not first sit down and calculate the cost tower, lest he begins to build and fails in the project and the tower stalls. Yeah. So it tells you that, of course, a lot of these things rise and fall at resources. So you find the delay will occur, the contractor has not been sufficiently funded to proceed. And I was telling you before we broke off that we execute projects in stages, and we also pay them in stages. Yeah, we issue what we call interim valuations as conservators, and which are certified by the designers, architects, engineers in interim certificates. And therefore, if the developer is not able to honor one of those certificates, then it cripples the contractor, who is the executor, and then also delays the project. Of course, there are other reasons, but this is a reason that is well within us. There are reasons that will be, of course, beyond the control of the parties. Yes.
Right.
But financing, in most cases, is largely one of the major
key reasons for the project delays.
Yes.
When quantity surveyors, most of the professionals in the built industry have for long complained that projects are given to outsiders, right? Yes. Is this the same case for quantity surveyors?
Yes, it is. The last time I was here,
yeah,
I was hosted here, I spoke about the case of unemployment and underemployment, because what tends to happen, and this is in a lot of the foreign developers, is that there is no requirement or enforced requirement that they need to use our consultants.
Right.
Yeah. In a lot of the incidences, what we are getting is designs that come from abroad, and they're adopted here, and all we get to do is one consultant who stamps for purposes of approval. And that is why when you drive around our towns, pick for instance Nairobi, you'll see a lot of construction. And you'll be forgiven for thinking that there's a boom in construction. But it's a very skewed boom. In this country, where professionals in the built environment are so few, how do they go unemployed when there is an apparent boom? You look at the sites, some of them don't even have siteboards. To put a siteboard is part of the law. If you're building, you must put a siteboard. That shows who is developing, what are they developing, who is involved as consultants, who is the contractor. In some, you'll see siteboards, and all they say is what is being built, and of course they have maybe the consultant who facilitated the approval, and none of the other consultants. So yes, in a sense, there are instances where there are practitioners who will come and practice here illegally. Of course, the work of weeding out those are our regulators. Is the Board of Registration for Architects and Conservators, and there is the Engineers Regulation Board. But yes, to answer your question, the biggest part is developers who do not use the services of consultants. And then there goes links to the earlier question you're asking about collapses. How do we have consultants on paper, but this person does not have supervision, either designed and left, so you're running. And besides the cost and the capex nature of the construction, it's the risky nature of a construction. And mostly, before you start going up, when you start going up several floors, and that's what we've seen, weight coming down on people. Now we are seeing another phenomenon where for the longest we were not doing that level of excavations. You've seen some of the depths of those excavations. That in itself is a risk. Without proper supervision, then you've seen some of those excavations cave in, and cover up and kill and injure people. So consultants are underutilized, and I think that we've just gone full circle. This is where we've begun. For myriad those reasons, plus others, that we have opened our market to be an environment where anyone comes, a foreigner, and does what they want. Of course, the bit where a foreign professional comes and practices, there are fewer, but they are there. There shouldn't be any, because the moment someone does that, you're denying our people.
The local
talent.
And they are qualified. It's not like they're underqualified.
Let me tell you, in these professions, you will rarely see a student who scored less than a B+ in KCSE. It's B+, A-, A's. And they're walking around with beautiful certificates. They went to university, got second class, upper, first class, but they're unemployed. The irony of it is the numbers are so few. And what appears to be we are doing well, why would they not be absorbed in? That level of unemployment, it makes no sense at all. That for us, we could expose ourselves to that level and waste our very good brains that would walk around trying to find alternative ways to make a living. Yes.
So how do we, from a policy environment, tackle this? Because as you said, it's quite the paradox, really.
Yeah.
There's a booming construction industry. But for some reason, the few professionals that we have in this country, most of them are jobless. How do we do that?
It's in this country, you know, it's never a shortage of policies and laws and regulations.
Right.
They're all there in place. It's the implementation. And it's one person, two people begin to stand and say, what are we doing to ourselves? Why can't we do things right? Like, for instance, myself, I have quite a number of years of practice. I can't just walk into another jurisdiction and start practicing. Well, it would happen here easily. Ask one of our developers or contractors if they went into another jurisdiction, whether they will go there and jump onto a site and start working. What would you let us happen here? And even start working without proper approvals. You have no consultants, you just no supervision, you're just running your own site. Yeah. So it is us to take a step back and reclaim our country in a sense. From, I know there are many sectors and many areas where we ought to do better, but now we are talking about construction.
Right.
It is us deciding. We have laws. When are we ever going to start implementing them? We must not only implement so that it benefits me directly. Yeah, if it is, we are guarding against my brother, my sister, you know, other people. And I guess we all have a duty, yeah, moral, or even call it from above, to sometimes do things that don't necessarily have to benefit me directly, just to do the right thing, so that the other person finds an environment that is better for them to be able to thrive. Yeah.
Right, so what would be your message to, because what are the actionable steps? What have these other countries done that Kenya is not doing?
They just have, it's just enforcement of their laws.
Right.
Like, for instance, in the case of developers and consultants, we have regulators. How do these people find their way? And we walk around and drive around these sites. Is in there one of these regulators who stops and asks, by the way, where are your approvals? So who are your consultants? Who is your architect? Who is your QS? Who is your engineer? Yeah? Is there some periodic way of, you know, checking this work? Do you meet, you know, something? Because sometimes you find us running when there's been a catastrophe. When someone has been doing the wrong things for a long time, we become more reactionary. Why can't we have a deliberate effort that a regulator tells themselves, I am in charge of these professions? Pick, for instance, architects and conservators. Yeah. Even as a regulator, do yourself do a study. Yeah? Levels of unemployment in the people that I regulate. And then ask yourself, then in our study, what could be the causes of this level of unemployment? Take it upon yourself, and you can see the constructions. Go find out, why aren't these people utilizing these professionals that I regulate? Because that is how to ring fence the environment that you regulate, and make sure these professionals are gainfully employed, because you are charged with regulating them. So what, do you just sit in the office and require them to pay you levies and fees, and that's it? Do you go home happy that you've done your work, when there is people's children whose only fault is that they chose these careers, and which they worked hard for, and in the end, they're unemployed? And you sit in your office day in, day out. You come in the morning, you leave. So does that, how it is, we have to start being human. Yeah? And to say that I will feel satisfied also when I'll get a salary, but I've seen today I've helped a life. That individual who was working jobless, because of me following through with the policy,